Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre. Hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond. Sometimes even through the transporter. You can find us on our new YouTube channel, Terror in Tandem, or online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at Terror in Tandem.
Ooh, it's like we're in one place and then instantaneously in another place.
Exactly. Listen, if you all are not in the car and don't want to listen to, you don't want to listen to your speakers or your headphones, you can just listen to us on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can transport yourself from one room to another.
Instantaneously with zero side effects or consequences or the possibility of anything going wrong. It's perfectly safe. Just get in the pod.
Exactly.
Get in the pod.
Just merge with me.
And subscribe.
Help me.
So, hi.
Hello.
Beloved, knowledgeable, lovable co-host.
Yeah, today is going to be an interesting one for sure.
One of my favorite
I can't wait
recurring
to relive
segments.
Part of this.
Understood.
This is just a warning for everybody. If you are eating and listening to this, don't. And also, if you are easily grossed out, you might want to just give us a download, a like, and maybe recommend this to somebody else, and maybe a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and then not listen if you're grossed out easily.
Why not slap yourself some sloppy Joe or a big old bowl of bolognese and listen to our Remake deep dive breakdown of The Fly.
The Fly. I guess it's really who you trust more. Do you trust my co-host or do you trust his co-host?
Oh, anyone trusting me is
so
foolish
are
for
you
doing
are
so.
you eating that bolognese or are you not listening to this because you've listened to my warning?
So the Remake recurring segment, I should say at this point, the world famous, renowned, award-winning segment, is my maybe favorite recurring segment that we do. I really enjoy it.
Let's say that about every recurring segment once or twice.
Probably.
You just watch.
I just like liking things. I
and
love doing this
too,
because I think part of it is I always enter into it. Most of these are movies I've seen before, so I always enter into it with an idea of what it's going to be like. But a lot of the times they're movies I haven't seen in many, many years, and I'm in a very different stage of my life, and it's always fascinating to see which ones hold up to my memory of them and which ones maybe fit where I was at that point in my life a little better than they do now. And I got to say, spoiler alert, the 1986 The Fly, better than ever. Better than ever.
Well, would you say that you're in the pupil or adult stage of your life?
Yeah, the larval, the chrysalis or pupa.
The maggot stage.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Probably in perpetual larval stage, I would say.
So, yeah, we're going to be talking about the 1958 original version of The Fly on film and the 1986 version of The Fly. And as my co-host brought up, sometimes he goes into this having watched a long time ago or not at all, both or one of the remakes. And same for me, I would say, for the most part.
Right.
Sometimes, I mean, I think our the Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen
You
either.
had never seen the original before.
So
yeah.
I came raw, everyone. I came to that raw.
I'll be honest. Before we did this and prepped for it, I had seen bits and pieces and clips and parts of the 1958 version because I love Vincent Price. I've seen so many of his movies, but I don't think I had ever seen it from start to finish.
Listen, this isn't
and definitely not watching it with the intensity that I did, in preparation.
And
for
you're
this
not going to
episode.
get full on Vincent Price in this. This is just Vincent Price is doing a favor.
He is. This is one of his rare turns as a not villain. He's a ostensibly good guy in this movie,
and a co-star, like a
he's a supporting role. He is
secondary
not the
co-star.
lead.
Yeah.
No. I would say arguably Patricia Owens is the lead of the film. She, in terms of screen time. Yeah.
That's part of what I'm going to talk about is whose story are we listening to?
Interesting.
Yeah. So why don't we get into some of the facts of the films, and let's start with the 1958 version.
Do it.
Directed by Kurt Newman.
Who
was a German sci-fi specialist.
Yes.
Who sadly died right before the premiere of this film.
I know. It was a bummer. He was one of those amazingly wonderful directors that just, and we still obviously have them today, but this dude cranked out B movie after B movie after B movie. He made like a bunch
and
of
he was
Tarzan
an expert
movies.
in the field, so he really had that science brain.
He was a working man. He was like a working man filmmaker. He made movies with, like low budgets, a lot of ingenuity. Now, his movies were pretty popular.
Yeah.
They were just pulpy. I mean, none of them were Oscar winning. I would say, honestly, of his filmography, The Fly is probably his best movie.
It was written by James Clavell.
Yes.
And pre-Shogun.
Yes.
He
that
wrote
is
Shogun.
Insane. I did not know that. An insane detail of this movie.
Was that one of your facts that you're going to share?
No, well, it began life as a novella that was published in Playboy.
I'm going to get into that.
Yeah. And then fucking, of all people, James Clavell, who went on later to write the massive Shogun series that then was adapted with James Mason and all that. It was like whenever you go into a used bookstore and you see like the biggest paperback ever, it's either Michener or it's James Clavell.
Yeah. Well, don't go off of that short story, because in 1957, so not even that long before this was made, a short story by James Langland.
I don't know.
Well, if you say it 3 times, he comes.
Oh, there he is. Hey, James. Sit next to Candyman. We'll get to you.
Yeah, so the short story, this film actually follows the short story very closely. The timeline has changed because of how the filmatic version is told. But I wanted to just mention, because I want to talk about this with the remake, is the budget for The Fly 1958 was $45,000.
Them's 1950 monies. So
but it made,
I think that's $8 billion now.
It made $3 million at the box office.
Yeah, it made tons of money. This movie was, interestingly enough, it was filmed in color. It's a color film. It spawned 2 sequels that were both filmed in black and white and kind of rushed out there. I'll get into the sequels in a second, because the second one especially is interesting. But in the 1958 version, we've got Vincent Price, like you said, in a supporting role. He's playing
a lovelorn brother.
Yeah, brother. He's the brother
of the scientist character,
Francois Delambre. This takes place in, outside of Montreal. This very wealthy family, and David Hedison plays Andre Delambre, who is the reclusive genius inventor who has made the family a fortune. And
his wife Helene is played by Patricia Owens,
who is very 1950s.
She does really carry the film.
Yes.
Because it is her story. And I think I mentioned that earlier, that I was going to tell you who's telling the story. This is her story. Even though it's about, the experiment going wrong. And let me just tell you a little plot summary. Is Andre's working on a matter transporter, and one of his experiments goes wrong with a fly trapped in the machine. He hides in the basement most of the second half of the film with a cloth over his head. His wife helps him but keeps her distance. He has a fly head and a hand, but mostly his human body stays intact.
Yes.
Although he's slowly losing his ability to communicate and think because his brain is a fly brain, we will see this detail play out in the fly version of Andre in the final scene.
That's one of the most interesting parts of this movie, is that slow degradation of his humanity and how he fights it, how his fly part sort of rebels and his human part. But when he's writing on the blackboard, like, stay away from me, I might hurt you.
Well, he's first communicating in typewriter. typing out this
and like sliding
messages,
it under the door.
He can barely function anymore, and towards the end he can't even write letters on the chalkboard.
He basically types like your boss that should have retired.
And Andre's murdered, so it starts out with Helene basically talking about responding to her brother-in-law, Vincent Price, coming and the cops coming and being like, "Oh, what happened to your husband?" She's like,
the framing of this movie,
I cannot tell you what happened.
The framing of this movie is interesting because you're right. It starts with the murder. She, puts her husband in
we're going to get to that.
Puts her husband in an industrial press, sets it to its highest setting that the husband invented, by the way. So like, Vincent Price runs this industrial press company or whatever that squishes things because Andre invented this machine that can squish things to like an atomic level. And she sets it to that and she squishes him in it. And, for 1958, there's a big old blood smear for that. It was quite something. So then the movie goes into like a 45-minute long flashback. Telling what it led up to.
It is very 1950s.
Most of the movie
is a
flashback.
The dynamic of like the Ozzie-Harriet relationship of Andre and Helene is pretty obvious. The the nanny and the housekeeper or the cook or whomever all those other women are only there to help her raise her child.
Now
Helene seems exhausted by every aspect of life except being a wife.
It's funny, I think, watching a character like Helene, any woman alive today, watching someone like Helene who needs to rest from a day of nothing.
The only emotions Helene shows in this film are exhaustion, and wouldn't even call that an emotion, but that's like just a feeling, and horror when she sees the reveal of her once beautiful husband's head now replaced by a fly head.
I'm going to come to
and
Helene.
Then the fly head, you see her face reacting
the
with
POV
the scream,
fly shot. Yeah.
And it's all the
multifaceted eye shot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's screaming and it's like hundreds of her.
And she passes out, of
really
course,
cool.
because her constitution can't handle it.
Well, let me explain that to you. You see, women...
Thank you.
Hold on, let me just spread my legs. Oh yeah, take up all the seat. Now, women are gentle. So, yes, now if I could step to Helene's defense a bit, she does live a life of insane luxury and leisure, and she's not exactly mom of the year to her little son Pierre. Now, on the other hand,
the one job that she has, she has a couple jobs to do. She's a mother, but she farms that job out. But the one job that she has to do in this film is to catch this fly with the white head.
Yes. See, in this version of the movie, the teleportation, let's back up a second and talk about Andre, played by David Hedison. Now, David Hedison...
he's a real eager scientist who has hope. He has hope throughout the whole movie, which I think is really important.
What I really liked about this version of the character is, and it's very different from Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, he is a straight-up God complex narcissist in this movie.
Nothing's going to stop him.
There's nothing good about him. He is handsome and charming, but an absolute psychopath.
Yeah.
He does not have emotion. He puts his fucking house cat in this machine.
His beloved house cat.
And that's his
doesn't even
first,
mention it.
That's his first attempt at like transporting something living. Not just, he doesn't put like an apple in there.
It goes from a teacup on a saucer to the house cat.
Yeah. And it goes great if you like cats that are inside out. So yeah, R.I.P. to a real one, this dude's cat. So he's a real piece of shit. And what I'm saying is, Helene, who, yes, up until this point has lived a life of ridiculous luxury and Valium, is basically forced to clean up this egomaniac's horrific mess and then kill him because the whole press idea is his. Mm-hmm. He begs her to do it.
It's such a brutal way to go.
Yeah, and she has to do it twice. That's actually quite a big point of contention in the film. That's how they know it was murder. Is she because she does it. The whole point is she has to destroy the parts of his body that are fly.
And his fly hand falls out
And
during
the inspector,
the first press.
Vincent Price, who knows this machine, makes this comment of like, it's set to a setting we would never put it at because nothing ever needs to be pressed to that degree. Like it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
And the point was to destroy any and all evidence, like Terminator style, how they have to destroy all the evidence. So poor Helene is not only forced to feed this disgusting monster a bunch of times, which
but she
leads
can't
to
even see the monster.
Yeah.
So she
has to do everything he says.
Things that she's never really been privy to his experiments.
Yeah, and she goes from zero to hero real quickly, and then has to kill and lie about it.
And everybody talks about how she's like her reaction, she doesn't seem remorseful, and she's in a
she explains it in that movie though.
Yeah,
no, she actually says the reason I'm acting like this is I have to act crazy, so I get sentenced that way, and then I can still be a mother, and like she has it all worked out, and she's really good. So this
is
one
a
thing
murder
about this
mystery.
movie. A little trivia about this movie is Vincent Price had a lot of... I think we all are familiar with the very famous last scene of the movie where they find the fly.
So,
with the human
let me
head.
talk about this. I want to talk about this.
Do it.
I think that Andre has hope, whether it's misguided or not.
But
it's fine.
it's all self-aggrandizing.
It
though.
is, but he still has
He wants
hope,
to win a
even
Nobel.
when he's half fly, half human. And that's the difference, the major difference between the experimental part
I disagree.
and result.
I don't think it's hope so much as he can't possibly be wrong.
Well, the experimental part, the big difference between the two films is that in the 1958 version, he becomes part human, part fly, and the fly becomes part human, part fly.
It does.
So they both
quite
exist
something.
at the same time, as opposed to the 1986 version. They merge as one genetic.
Yes. It's a fusion.
New being.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at with the hope, Andre's hope, is the hope to reverse the experiment. That is what he's working on the whole time. He becomes part man, part fly, and instead of like asking for help or killing himself or whatever, he's like, I'm going to be able to reverse this. Catch the fly. Catch the fly. And the tragedy is that his last hope to reverse this terrible experiment is lost because they can't catch the fly. The fly gets outside and gets trapped in a spider web. And then we have the famous
the scene
nearing the end of the film scene.
It's a fly with his head on it and going, help me.
Trapped in a spider web.
Being wrapped up in a spider web, and a spider, sorry, I'm not home right now. But the spider coming towards it, about to, inject it with venom and suck its juice out. It's actually quite terrifying.
It is. And the cop is like, I'll never get those
the only people that
screams.
witness it are Vincent Price and the police inspector. And thankfully, the police inspector sees it because they then come up with a very convincing alibi that completely gets Helene out of trouble, and it ends on a happy note.
Well, it ends on a weird note.
They
Because
do.
then
They crush it with a rock.
Originally lovelorn
Vincent
Price
he moves
finally gets
right
the girl.
Absolutely.
And the kid to boot. Yeah.
That honestly, I'm going to say, is probably going to be a better husband than
I'm
Andre
sure.
was. But Vincent Price was very fond of this movie. He said it was called it a wonderful, suspenseful little film. But he admits he had a lot of trouble getting through that last scene because they did the voice on set. And every time he heard the squeaky chipmunk voice, he cracked up. He said it took him at least 20 takes, and he was profusely apologizing to everybody, but he and the old guy that played the inspector just could not stop giggling like little kids over this. They thought it was hilarious. But I will say, in the film's defense, it works on camera.
It does work. I think that I have a couple of bullet points. This is a murder mystery, so it's very different
really
than
is.
the other
yes,
film.
It really is.
It's from Helene's perspective, and she is really the one that's telling the story, and we're seeing it play out from her memory of and her retelling of it. And it's a slow burn, and the experiments are pretty immediately escalated.
Yeah.
As opposed to the remake, which
Like
is
a
a
lot
little
of-
bit more progress.
Like a
slow
lot of
progression.
movies of this era, the atomic era, the real villain of the movie is rampant science, like irresponsible experimentation, toying with forces you never should have messed with in the first place, and creating something terrible. Unlike a lot of movies from that era, I think one of the things that makes this succeed so well is you only see the fly parts in like 2 scenes, I think.
I mean,
They're
what did
very
I say
sparing.
when I saw the full head and arm in the man outfit? That would make an amazing Halloween costume.
Yes. For one, it's a very high quality mask. Like they do a really good job, but much like using CGI effectively, the best way, in my opinion, to use CGI is to use it sparingly, to enhance. They don't spend a lot of camera focus on the mask, so you don't have a lot of time to see all of the crappy parts of it, which to great effect. There's a
great
lot
effect
of
for that part, but I would say that the cinemascope of it all, the low lighting and the gothic cramped lab of it, that's effective. But the small budget, it's every other scene outside of the lab is somewhat like lackluster.
Yeah, and it's all
pretty
filmed
cookie
in
cutter.
It's filmed in Technicolor, and it has like special effects on the level of like the original Star Trek.
But the fact that the lab is low lit and it's like a basement lab, that adds to the sort of monster grotesque.
I want to call out the lab because it's a real transition from the 1930s, 1940s Tesla era mad scientist lab, where it's like actinic coils of sparking electricity.
Spaces.
This is very much atomic era. There are reel-to-reels. There are like neon lights, buttons and knobs, and switchboards. So it's like a definite transition in the aesthetic of what science fiction and speculative fiction authors think of as cutting edge. So that's kind of cool. It's no longer like trying to trap lightning, and stuff like that. It's a little bit more advanced, but still looking back at it, you're like, wow, that's a reel-to-reel on the wall, big old tapes.
And I think the
punch
point,
cards,
the like philosophical questions that these films bring up, and the point is that the monster is the horror. It's not the monster causing violence or like, causing horrific things to happen. It's the actual creation of the monster itself, much like Frankenstein. It's
one
the
thing that
monster
also
is the horror part.
One thing I want to mention that hit me in a way I wasn't expecting was, now this man is very wealthy, and he conducts all of these experiments out of his private lab at home, and no one checks on him or asks him what he's up to. And he's got like bleeding edge equipment there, and it just reminded me. And
does Seth Brundle.
Yes, but he does like horrible things and like all that, and basically everyone gets away with it because they're rich. And even when the inspector's questioning Helene, he's like, "Are you okay? Can I get you anything?" It's like, Jesus Christ, they don't even arrest her. They never arrest her.
And the thing is, the housekeeper still shows up for work.
Oh yeah,
she's like, "I'm not afraid of her. Are you okay, Miss Helene?"
And it just really struck me that, wait a second, that happens all the time now. We live in a world saturated with weird billionaires conducting weird experiments with no regulation. Basically, they are as powerful as governments at this point. So just waiting for Elon Musk to turn himself into some sort of, I don't know, gnat, maybe a slug.
So one thing that I did that's different about this remake is I identified one fly pun from each version.
Very nice.
So before we take a break, I'll give you the fly pun for the 1958 version.
I would love to hear it.
Are you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So the fly pun from the 1958 version is Andre was swatted by a hydraulic press.
It's good. It's good. He was. It squished his fly parts.
Yep. Squish him twice.
And they did show the part where she squishes him down, and then she has to rush back and like move his squishy body and do it again.
All
and
in heels.
All in heels. And that little skirt, her hair is perfect.
Well, it wasn't a little skirt. It was a long
what I mean,
skirt.
like, is like, it's not a little skirt. It's like one of those skirts that
petticoat,
covers.
it's called.
Yeah, and so you can only take very short strides. So she's just like flitting about and then like, you know, crushing her husband and then going back to the controls. And, you know, it kind of reminded me of like when James Bond comes out of the ocean in a wetsuit and his hair is perfect and he's wearing a tux.
Or when
or nothing. Or just a banana hammock.
I was just going to say, or when Sydney Bristow swims into the pool and comes out and she's ready to spy.
Yeah. She's always ready to spy.
All right, let's take a break and come back for the gross part 2.
It's been a long road to growing the perfect clone. And a bumpy one at that. Sure, you've made mistakes. The path to greatness requires breaking a few clone eggs, after all. But now that you've got your genetically identical assistant in place, the question remains, what to do with all the hideous corpses of your failures? Well, why not call Boys from Brazil Clone Disposal? Using our patented clonoscopy procedure, we'll terminate and extract any remaining biomass from your life tubes, leaving behind a clean lab with a fresh lavender scent. At Boys from Brazil Clone Disposal, all of our equipment is powered by biofuel. We use every part of the discarded clone meats to keep our carbon footprint neutral. Or, for an added fee, we can render your discarded husks down into nutrients for your viable experiments. So skip the muss, skip the fuss, skip the staring into your own face as you navigate the murky ethics of purging your infant duplicates. Call Boys from Brazil Clone Disposal, and let us sweep up your malformed homunculi under the rug so you can get back to mocking God. This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. Do not clone humans, or hire people to dispose of the cloned humans you should not have made. Welcome back. And yes, as beloved co-host Laura mentioned, let's just get this out of the way. The next movie
is The Fly 1986,
and it's
directed
gross.
by the gross out king himself, David Cronenberg,
the maestro,
who's Canadian. And so I say that because it doesn't line up with his disgustingness.
No, I think it's perfect because there's just something off about them Canucks. I tell you.
Written by Cronenberg and Charles Edward Pogue.
Yes. Well, Pogue turned in a draft that Cronenberg later said, you know, I definitely couldn't have made the movie without the groundwork he laid, but Cronenberg, basically it was a page one rewrite.
I heard that Pogue turned in his draft and then Cronenberg took red and orange Jell-O and dumped it on top of the draft and said, now we're getting somewhere.
He was like, well, what if we put in some techno-organic vaginas? Would that do it? Can I make that?
First of all, we need to start with the naming of characters. We'll get to that in a minute.
I demand we say the word flesh 7 times a scene.
The budget for this film was $9 million. And it made $60 million.
$60 million 1986 dollars, which in those days just featured bricks of cocaine on them.
And it got a Best Actor nomination for Jeff Goldblum.
And
didn't win.
Didn't win, but who did win? Legendary Chris Wallace for the effects.
Yes.
Won the Academy Award, and
God, remember, didn't I ask you
have.
that while we were watching it?
Yes, he did win the Oscar for that. He also quite famously, now Chris Wallace is a name you might not be familiar with, but you really should be because he...
Not that Chris Wallace.
No, let's just get that out of the way.
Forget all the Chris Wallace bullshit, Yeah. And listen to this new Chris.
Now, this gentleman...
This is one of the better Chris's.
Yes. He is probably best known for literally creating the Gremlin, the Mogwai, and the evil Gremlins. So he designed Gremlins. But he also was part of the team that made the face melting scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which very much explains.
Yeah. Don't look at that Ark of Covenant.
But that's also explains a couple of scenes in this movie with dissolving body parts. He used the same exact technique. He was like, "Oh, you need me to dissolve a body part? I actually am really good at that. I know exactly how to do it."
So sorry.
So Laura had a bit of trouble getting through this.
No,
one.
listen. I'm gonna get through the plot summary that I wrote.
Okay.
Jeff Goldblum's Seth Brundle finds that during teleportation, a fly is sealed into the chamber with him, and their genetic profiles converge. It's significantly different than the original and the short story, but the premise is the same. The scientist doesn't pay close enough attention to the life-altering transportation of a fly trapped in the machine with him. Oopsie.
It's a big oopsie. Let's get a couple things right out of the gate. Now, number one, you and I both really enjoyed the 1958 version of The Fly.
Surprisingly,
we really did.
I thought it was really nerving.
It's dated. It's certainly of its time. But it's
unnerving.
A good movie. However,
there were problems, but
the 1986
I
version is so far superior in every way that, with no disrespect to the Vincent Price, the 1958 version, this is an all-time classic. It's a B movie compared to a literal top 10 of all time.
I would say that the 1958 version is more accessible.
It's like a drive-in movie.
The 1986 version is more horrific.
And yet, despite how goopy it is, it made $60 million, y'all.
One of the things that happens too is, the difference I talked about. They become one. Seth transforms physically and mentally in a very visceral way.
Jeff Goldblum,
and he does a great job. Jeff Goldblum
gives maybe his best performance.
The whole movie, I would say, Seth's character is consistent. He doesn't change at all. His mission is always the science and thinking, and is this going to work better? His intensity
Jeff Goldblum's
is the same.
Natural energy is perfect for this role, which is something because he was not first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or really any kind of choice until much later in the production of this film. The studio, let's get into a little history about this.
Yeah,
first
please.
Off. Now, the studio originally wanted Tim Burton to direct this movie.
Oh,
which,
wow.
No, I don't.
Well,
it would be something, but it wouldn't be this.
1986 Tim Burton?
Still, no, Tim Burton at his peak. But we're definitely getting a much different movie if Tim Burton directs this. Now, Cronenberg at the time was signed on to direct Total Recall. Now, that is a movie I do want to see. In my list of movies you see in hell. Yeah. Now,
that's
everything all worked out for the best because Tim Burton went on to do Beetlejuice. David Cronenberg did The Fly, and Paul Verhoeven did Total Recall, and all three of those movies are incredible, just the way they are. But it's on my list with Jodorowsky's Dune and George Miller's Justice League. I want to see David Cronenberg's version of Total Recall. That is probably fucking incredible. Can you imagine Quado, but Cronenberg style? Anyway, so
Quadoberg.
For Seth Brundle, they wanted everyone from John Lithgow to...
he would have been good, too.
He would have been good, because he's good in everything.
Not he wouldn't be the sexy part. Like, it would have been a little harder.
Obviously, he wouldn't match the incredible raw sexuality of Jeff Goldblum, because nothing can.
The raw sexuality that Jeff Goldblum is convinced us all that we can't walk away from.
Hold on, let me just flip through this dictionary. Yeah, no, that is Jeff Goldblum. I'm looking at Jeff Goldblum. So,
and he's looking at himself.
Let's talk about that for a second. Jeff Goldblum, I think I have a theory that in his writer, it says, I must have a scene in this movie where I play piano and or keyboard while monologuing.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about it now, and everything from Thor Ragnarok to The Fly, he is monologuing while playing piano. and he's good at it. And it's great to watch. But in this movie, he's definitely very much in his, like, I don't wear my shirt very much era.
Yeah.
So, and good on him. So, The Fly. Now, Jeff Goldblum gets this role, and it's one of those instances of, like, just perfect. He's perfect in it because he kind of acts like a fly. And when he starts transforming, he takes on the immediate and brutal qualities of a fly, which has a lifespan of like a week maybe. So basically when he's like in this midway point, there's that famous bar scene where he breaks a guy's arm and he takes this woman home and he fucks her in this really weird way.
Yeah.
But like you can see it. He just needs to breed. That's all he needs to do. He's acting like a fly. It's really cool. Jeff Goldblum nails it. Now, they did offer the role to both Michael Keaton and Mel Gibson, who turned it down.
Good.
Which, great. Mel Gibson turned it down because he wanted to do Lethal Weapon, and I think that was a good choice.
Well, Mel Gibson turned it down because he was like, flies are black, so I'm not really interested in that.
I just like the fact that he turned it down and they gave it to Jeff Goldblum, who, if I'm not mistaken, might be Jewish. Now, for the incredibly named character of Veronica Quaife, now I do want to remind you this is a Canadian movie, so I'm pretty sure Quaife is Canadian for queef. This is a Cronenberg film, so that tracks.
Well, we learned that from
South Park?
Yeah, because
Quaife. Those
were Canadian. Yeah. What are they? Terrence and...
I don't remember. Philip,
yeah.
So anyway, Veronica Quaife is... now, Cronenberg wanted Linda Hamilton. And Linda Hamilton was into it until she got to the part of the script where there's the dream sequence of her giving birth.
Yeah, let me do the plot twist part.
Okay.
So I told you what the film is about, the oopsie moment. Plot twist, he gets his girlfriend, Veronica, who we talked about, played by the always stylish Gina Davis.
Oh, love Gina Davis.
He gets her pregnant, but this is post-fly merge, pre-super gross out transformation, and in a last effort of humanity, he takes her from an almost abortion back to his lab to convince her to keep the baby, because what he says is, I don't want the Brundle line to die with me.
No, he says something along the lines of like, the only part of me that is still human is your baby.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. She has, and this is what Linda Hamilton, why she said no to the movie, is she got to the part which is a dream sequence of Veronica Quaife giving birth to a giant, writhing, bloody maggot. Now, in that scene... Yeah, big. In that scene, the gynecologist is none other than David Cronenberg himself. Obviously, because if there's a scene in the movie where he has to stare at someone in stirrups, he's like, well, I mean, listen, if no one wants it, I'll just play the part myself. I don't mind. But actually, there is a story behind that. He was invited to lunch by Martin Scorsese, who was, basically like, hey, I really like your movies. I want to talk to you. And he told Cronenberg, you look more like a Beverly Hills doctor than you do a film director. And he kind of does, honestly.
Yeah.
So as a nod to Scorsese, he put himself as the
He's got that,
as the doctor.
Nice pants, no sock.
Well, his hair, too, is always very groomed.
Tan loafer wearing.
Yeah. He kind of also looks like a professor.
Yeah.
Like he could be maybe like a creepy professor. So
Mr. Pedo wants to see you after class.
Absolutely does. Absolutely. And don't go. Now, there's a lot going on in this movie. The reason why... Actually, let me back up. I don't want to move far away from the maggot part. So Linda Hamilton said no.
I want to, please.
Because of that, much to our joy, because Gina Davis rules in this movie. Now, the funny thing is, in The Fly 2, which, by the way, was directed by special effects guru Chris Wallace, and no disrespect, Mr. Wallace, you're really good at one of those jobs. So, The Fly 2, which is completely bananas. It begins with a different actress playing Veronica Quaife, but it begins with the character dying while giving birth to a giant writhing pupa. So the dream comes true and she dies. It's like, well, yeah, you fucking carried that thing to term. Like, what did you think was gonna? You fucked a fly monster.
Yeah, but she didn't know he was a fly monster.
She did after she got pregnant.
I know.
She started screaming, "I want this out of my body." That's just one reason.
Here's the thing, though.
The only good thing about The Fly 2 is Daphne Zuniga is in it. That's it.
Bursts through the doctor's office and steals her away from her trying to take care of this pregnancy.
So let's talk about his lab for a second.
Wow. Talk about unchecked.
He's got like
fancy.
It reminds me a little bit of Ghostbusters when Bill Murray says like, well, Dan Aykroyd says something like, each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on our backs. And you get that sense of like,
from each other
slowly. And they're in an elevator and they're like start inching away from each other. Like that'll help. But yeah, he's basically in like, a city loft with like nuclear technology.
Well, he's in like a meatpacking district.
Yeah, it's like a
hipster
kind of
something he can afford to live in and where nobody will bother him.
Yeah, but like now, if you were to get a place like that in Brooklyn, it would be like $5 million.
Yeah. That's a Dumbo loft.
So, but he's got these crazy H.R. Giger looking things.
They're incredible pods.
Yeah, they are really cool designs. They're
and
very
I think that
techno-organic.
Because of the window is really important because of the monkey.
The baboon.
The baboon.
Yes, now
moment.
The baboon
and
that is in the film.
we see the fly and he doesn't, which is also
The baboon
great.
in that film was played by an untrained animal named Typhoon. It caused quite a lot of damage and terror on the set.
Well, his name is Typhoon. What do you expect?
Also an untrained baboon, Laura.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have all the regulations.
So that scene when it's like jumping up in Jeff Goldblum's arms, like that's a wild baboon.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
He's so snuggly with it too.
I know. I was very shocked to learn that was not it. So there actually was a moment when it rampaged and Jeff Goldblum being 6'4", used his size to like physically intimidate the baboon into submitting.
He probably made baboon moves.
I guarantee he did. I 100% guarantee Jeff Goldblum was running around set that day half naked after just having played piano,
so
making
we
baboon
have to
noises.
remember this. Whenever you see Jeff Goldblum in an elevator or there's a situation where you can ask him only one question, the question is, how did you wrangle the baboon from
please regale
the
me
film The Fly
with the tale of when you used your physical body.
Let me tell you that story. I haven't been asked that in so
Interesting
long.
question, of course. See, now the thing is, baboon, I, of course, took my shirt off immediately. I had just finished playing piano. It was, if I don't recall, Rachmaninoff. Yes. And so, listen, there's another thing I need to talk about. And that thing is Stathis Borans. Now, Stathis Borans is played by the great John Getz.
John Getz. Oh, wow.
Who is in literally everything.
He is the, perfect douchebag in this
he's
movie.
One of those wonderful character actors who I'm sure in real life is perfectly delightful, but is typecast as a jerk-off in everything. Now,
so at this point in the film, basically, Jeff Goldblum has stolen Veronica from trying to get the fly baby out of her.
Yes, because he's I think we skipped over a little bit. So
we'll get back into
he teleports
the gross
with
part.
a fly.
Yeah.
Now what happens is, in a very chilling moment, his computer, which is a big boxy 80s thing, but in reality is maybe the most advanced computer ever created. Now here's the funny thing. They never mention this fact, but what Seth Brundle is basically working with is like a fully functioning AI that perfectly recognizes
questions.
It's like
logic questions.
It's like Mother from Alien. He's asking it questions and it's answering him. And it's very chilling when he discovers that he did not actually invent a teleportation device so much as a gene splicer. And it turns out he's asking a series of questions, and the computer eventually tells him that he's not part fly. He and the fly have bonded on a molecular level. He is fly.
And so he starts referring to himself as Brundlefly.
He calls himself Brundlefly, which is great because that's how we all know it. But I had forgotten, honestly, it's been so many years since I've seen it, I had forgotten that he self-named himself Brundlefly.
Well, I think this film, more so than the 1958, is really an homage to Kafka, because this is really the metamorphosis.
Oh, and you see a
playing
lot
out.
of it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Really
and
do.
I will leave the
so
room.
much. Now,
again.
here's the thing. I think we've established.
Do you want to tell everybody what happened?
Listen, I think we've established on this podcast that you and I, one of the things that I really enjoy is that while we are both huge horror hounds, we do have different proclivities and different tastes. You gravitate towards true crime, suspense, serial killers, and I have a lot of different likes, but I do love a nice gooey bucket of gore movie, and that's what this is.
So
this
one
is
of
very
my
much
bullet points is that this is a body horror.
It's a body horror
The other one
film.
is a murder mystery, which I do love.
And this is very much Cronenberg body horror, and it's Cronenberg at the height of his powers. He is coming off doing Scanners, The Dead Zone. Which
isn't grotesque.
Scanners and no, The Dead Zone is not. He's fresh off doing those. He's about to do Dead Ringers. He's getting big Hollywood
grotesque,
offers,
but in a different way,
much
in a
different
way that I handle.
Yeah, but also full of vagina, and Jeremy Irons. So it
twice. That's much.
Yeah. Twice the vagina, twice the Jeremy Irons, obviously, to keep up with how much vagina and flesh. There's always so much flesh. And also, he had just made Videodrome. So he's like, everybody knows who this dude is at this point and what kind of movie he makes. And it's wild to me that a major studio was like, yeah, go for it. Fucking David Cronenberg it up.
And instead of hiding the eating habits and the fly habits from us, like the 1958
he does it under
this shows
a
everything.
hood. This shows him vomiting caustic fluid onto his food the way a fly does and then slurping it back up. Now that fluid, which is used to great effect several times in the movie to melt body parts, ankles, food, it was a mixture of raw eggs, milk, and honey.
Yum.
That's how they got that. So good on Jeff Goldblum for his commitment. And he's amazing. What I really love about his characterization is as his body is undergoing an absolutely grotesque and prolonged metamorphosis into this fly hybrid monster that is very gooey.
Not fly hybrid monster.
Brundlefly.
New created monster.
It's a new thing. It's neither fly nor human.
Yeah.
So he is analyzing himself in this weirdly detached way that only like a crazy scientist could do.
And he cops to it. He says, I am no longer... I don't care. I don't have humanity anymore.
Now, here's
human.
the thing. The 1958 version has that wonderful moment where he's writing on the chalkboard and his handwriting's getting like more and more. The more he does it and the more time goes by, his handwriting is like more. It gets worse.
He can't speak at all.
His grammar is bad, but he's basically writing like, "Please kill me" or "Get away from me. I'm going to hurt you." And they give that. In 1986, they allow Jeff Goldblum to have a really touching moment that is heartbreaking. And Gina Davis, too, is wonderful in this scene where, he's basically begging her, like, he's like, I am not human or a fly. I feel urges and I'm going to hurt you if you stay near me.
Yeah. So but he doesn't want her to kill him at this point, because when he does grab her and takes her back to the lab, he tries to force her to merge with him and become one new collective being.
Yes, his ultimate plan as he's like about to transition into full-on fly monster is, let's hop in the transporter together. That way you, me, and the fetus inside you will all come out as one being and we'll be the perfect family. Which, sure.
And this is where Stavis has his only redeeming moment, as he takes care of...
Stathis Baron.
Oh, Stavis is what I called him? I thought it was
Stavis. It's Stathis. Stathis, up until this point, is every insufferable douchebag you have ever met. He's
a terrible ex-boyfriend.
He's horrible. He's a creeper. He is a misogynist. You can't stand this motherfucker. And John Getz plays it wonderfully. How my hat is always off to a villain that can really just play somebody loathsome. And Stathis is that, except
at the end,
he does save the day.
And I have to say,
through incredible amounts of pain and personal loss and body damage, he still saves the day.
This is where the beautiful part of the movie exists.
Agreed.
So the ex comes in, saves the day. And this is where the newly formed Brundlefly
enters its final transformation.
He merges with the tubing system.
Actually, before that, when he becomes the big like monster fly version of himself.
Yeah, because
his skin sloths off. Now, Chris Wallace does. This is why he won the Oscar. Is this scene basically the skin slothing off? It is the best transformation scene outside of An American Werewolf in London. It is so good, and then becomes this really scary giant fly monster. But then you're talking about what happens is Stathis basically, even though he's got one hand and foot melted off.
Let me share that part. Brundlefly, new emerging fly monster, throws Veronica into the teleportation. He himself closes the teleportation.
And that moment is so scary because you see Gina Davis locked in there.
And that's what's good
and
about
she
these
knows
machines is the windows. Because we see
you can see her and you know from the look in her eyes, she knows what's going to happen if this thing goes off because she has spent the last few days watching all of the horrible things. And also, she's
about to die as she knows it. This baby's going to die.
She's probably going to get turned inside out.
Seth is totally gone at this point.
Yeah. The guy she loved is bananas.
And so Stathis...
and has back hair.
Shoots the connector tubes.
Yeah.
Connecting...
thank you for using the scientific term.
You're welcome. The official connector tubes, connecting
of
Seth
the Brundle pods
to Veronica, and so the teleportation still happens. But what now we have is this newly emerged crazy fly monster and the tubing system,
and so it merges with the pod in this amazing H.R. Giger inspired moment of techno-organic biofusion, which has always been a David Cronenberg thing. I mean, watch James Woods putting a VHS tape into his stomach mouth.
But this is where the beautiful stuff comes.
In Videodrome.
He comes out...
or real life.
Dragging these entrails of machine.
Yeah, he's merged with like tubes and pipes.
Gina Davis holds the gun up to shoot him, but she can't. She's like, I loved this man. We were in love, and this is what's happening. I can't do it. And this machine fly monster takes the gun and puts it to its own head.
Yes.
And she still backs away, crying. It's a very emotionally difficult scene because she's at once feeling all of the grief and all of the loss at once.
To the puppeteers and the effects team, because in this goopy nightmare monster, you feel empathy and you feel its pain. You can see it. And they did that deliberately. Chris Wallace said we gave it big old Jeff Goldblum eyes.
Yeah.
Because we wanted you to connect. I
wasn't sad to see it go.
No, it's a real testament to the talent of the team in this horrific goopy monster that could be either nightmarish and irredeemable or rubbery and stupid looking is in fact you can sense its emotion and its pathos in a animatronic.
Yeah.
Like damn, that's good work.
So the bullet points for this film are body horror. This is told from Seth's perspective.
Yes.
It's really his story, and although the film moves quickly, the metamorphosis and like movement into this final experiment is very slow paced and intentional.
Yes. Now, this movie can be divided into two halves. The first half of the movie
is palatable. Like I didn't have any gross out moments.
Laura has seen this movie several times before, so we'll forgive her that she did miss a good solid 25 minutes of this movie. and had to be told when it was okay to come back.
I stood in the other room.
Yeah, she heard a lot of it. So and I was just sitting there happy as a clam.
No, his face was of shock.
Oh, yeah, because this movie, listen, it still hits, man. It is gross as hell. When he is popping his fingers, it is disgusting. And pulling off his nail, it's a lot. So I have a couple of fun tidbits about this movie. Now, Gina Davis, I said Linda Hamilton turned this role down. David Cronenberg was very hesitant to cast Gina Davis because the reason she got this role is Jeff Goldblum was dating her and insisted she get an audition. However, she nailed the audition, and I don't want to hear any fucking shit against Gina Davis because she's a queen and she's great in everything she does. And
why would anybody give any hard time?
Because, after Cutthroat Island, her career basically died for, like 20 years, but she's been having a bit of a resurgence, and I'm here for it. Yeah. She was and continues to be awesome. Now, you might be surprised, as I was. I never noticed this before. But when we got to the end of the movie, I saw produced by Mel Brooks. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this movie was produced by Mel Brooks, that Mel Brooks. And he very deliberately kept his name off all marketing materials until after the release of the movie because he did not want people to think it was going to be funny.
Yeah.
He is also the one who gave Veronica Quaife the line, "Be afraid, be very afraid." That's his creation, which ended up being the incredibly famous tagline of the movie. It was on all the posters. It's on the box art. That is from fucking producers, Blazing Saddles himself, Young Frankenstein, Mel Brooks. Man loves horror movies. So, but kudos to him for ponying up the cash and promoting this movie and insisting that his name be hidden because he didn't want people to get the wrong impression.
Yeah, that's great. Because they would have. People would have.
Yeah, they would have been like, what is this? Isn't funny? Because it's not. Now, after the movie was released, a very sincere Jeff Goldblum wrote a letter to Vincent Price, who was still at that time alive. Vincent Price's last role, I believe, was his cameo in Edward Scissorhands. One of the few celebrities that I cried when he died. I didn't know him or anything. He just had that effect on me. So after the release, Jeff Goldblum wrote a letter to Vincent Price saying, "I hope you enjoyed my movie as much as I have always loved yours." And Vincent Price was two things. He was an absolute gentleman.
And hilarious.
And hilarious and blunt. And he wrote back something to the effect of, "Your movie was wonderful up until a certain point."
I agree.
Which... fair.
And don't forget out there.
And I also think we know pretty much what that point was.
Vincent Price and his wife put out a cookbook.
Oh, Vincent Price was a very cultured man. And, in the defense of David Cronenberg and Jeff Goldblum, Vincent Price was in his fair share of gory movies himself. Yeah. Mask of the Red Death and Theater of Blood have their moments, okay?
Vincent Price walked so Jeff Goldblum could turn into Brundlefly.
Amazing. Nom, 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 nom. Nothing makes me hungry like this movie. So now... I'm very much looking... Cronenberg is obviously one of my all-time favorite directors. He has such an incredible body of work. His new film, upcoming, that he's working on...
Can I give this fly pun to this film?
Oh, yes, please.
So before we close out on this film, I want to give my fly pun. Seth was a fly on the wall hearing that he has a baby on board in Veronica's Quiff.
Oh, my God. So let me just hold on. Insert edit point right here and cut. So there was a point in the movie that you made me absolutely lose my shit.
Yeah, it's like, that's a fly on the wall.
It's
this
when
is why I
Brundlefly is spying on her.
Yeah,
and you're like,
she's
oh, he's
fighting
a fly
with
on the wall. Stathis. Not. You keep calling him Stannis Baratheon, and that is a very different thing.
Stavis Baratheon.
Listen, Stathis Borans and Veronica Quaife and Seth Brundle, this movie has names galore in it.
Yeah.
But now, it's not going to be for everybody. It is a body horror film. It is Cronenberg.
Yeah, we've already talked about that.
All that.
Go on to
but
what Cronenberg has
now,
coming out.
Watch this
Edit
movie.
Point here.
It's the best. This may be the best. I think for our younger viewers, especially younger listeners, Jeff Goldblum as an older man has sort of gone the Christopher Walken way where he's like always Jeff Goldblum. But there was a very long period of time where he was a celebrated actor, and deservedly so. this might be the best he ever was. I think this is his best role.
If you read the short story and you're like, which filmatic version should I watch? Here's the answer to that. Do you like murder mystery and slow burn and like somewhat horror, scary weirdness? Then watch the 1958. Do you like sex and gore and blood and viscera and gooey, ooey metamorphosis? Then watch the 1986 version.
Well, they're both very much products of their time. I mean, the 50s version is obsessed with, like I said, rampant science, which at that point created the atomic bomb.
Accelerated science.
So
and
the 80s version is largely seen, although Cronenberg intended it to be an allegory for disease
like terminal
overall.
Illness.
Yes. It largely,
but
by
because
critics...
it came out in 1986.
Because it came out in 1986, it was very much seen as an allegory for contracting AIDS. Because Seth Brundle is not bad. I would say Andre Delambra from the original is much more of a god complex evil scientist. Seth Brundle is like, I want to save the world with my technology. And he has a lot of more likable qualities to him. Jeff Goldblum plays him with a certain amount of vulnerability and insecurity. He essentially puts himself through the pod because he's insecure about his girlfriend. So, like, he's pathetic, but also a genius.
Yeah.
But he does actually at one point say, I don't even really understand everything that I've built. I order stuff from scientists. I tell them what I want, and I slap it together.
Yeah, it's like I ordered this on Amazon.
It's
and watched
another
a couple
reminder.
YouTube videos on how to put it together. Maybe
a society where billionaires can do whatever they want whenever they want is not the best idea. Because he actually brags in this movie, no one ever like talks to me or bothers me or checks up on me. I basically do whatever I want, and whatever I want is bad. So there is a deleted scene that was cut from this movie where we find out that he tries to merge. Something happens with Typhoon where he merges it with a cat.
Oh.
So that doesn't go well, but that didn't make it into the movie.
Well, do you want to share what Cronenberg has coming up?
I do, because, listen.
Or going down.
Crimes of the Future, while it was a bit of a mixed bag in my future, was a return to form for Cronenberg in that in recent years he's made more dramas and thrillers than outright horror, and especially that very particular brand of Cronenberg horror. Now, upcoming, he has a movie in development called Shrouds. Now, this sounds right up the old Cronenberg alley. It is got a great cast. We've got Guy Pearce, Vincent Cassel, and Diane Kruger. That sounds fantastic to me. Apparently, it's about somebody invents a method to communicate the dead by wearing their burial shrouds. Sure. Fucking A. Sign me up. Cronenberg's directing it with that cast. I hope Viggo Mortensen pops up because he has really turned out to be Cronenberg's muse in the last decade.
He's pretty great.
And Viggo Mortensen is always great in everything he does. But,
whatever version of The Fly you decide to watch, we hope that we helped you make a decision and you enjoyed our remake.
I did.
The Fly.
Watch out for Stathis, by the way.
Yeah.
Seriously, even if he does end up saving you, it might not be worth it.
No, he's definitely in Congress right now at this point.
Definitely a Supreme Court justice.
Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Suspanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're